I'm Lisa Kay, here co-hosting with the lovely Jen Conkey, and we have an amazing guest today, Coach Jen. So we've got lots of Jens up in her today.
It's all about the Jen squared.
Yeah, love it, love it. Jennifer, and Lisa. We're like totally 80s. It's fine. All right. So, all right. I want to tell you guys a little bit about Coach Jen. So Coach Jen Matthews is a performance coach whose 24-year career spans professional dance, fitness, corporate wellness, behavioral health, and transpersonal psychology. What a resume. Yeah. So transpersonal psychology is the study of human potential. I'm so excited to talk about this with you guys today. Her company, the Move Strong Method, specializes in performance coaching for parents and life skills coaching for athletes. She's a mompreneur, whoop, whoop, who loves cooking, play, and travel with family. So Coach Jen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, ladies. I'm super excited to support you, supporting me with all the love.
Right?
Yes. Oh my gosh. What an amazing background. So I'm sure our guests are thinking, our listeners are thinking, where's this even going to go? We could probably talk for 2 hours. There's so many things. And even actually, Coach Jen and I were on the phone. We just kind of fell in love with each other. So like, she's amazing.
She really is. That's why I was like, oh my gosh, we got to try and get her on here.
Thank you
for joining us, Jen.
She's like the soul sister you've always been looking for. So for our listeners, you guys are going to love Coach Jen. So Jen, I want to take advantage of our precious time. So let's jump right in. Tell us a bit about your background. So you have a really interesting story and sort of how that led up to this transpersonal psychology focus and performance coaching for parents. So just dive in and kind of walk us through that.
Absolutely. So the performance, it's kind of a bookend. It begins and it ends with performance. So my original track in performance was with dance, and I danced for 16 years. And people start doing the math on my age and they're like, what? But I did actually dance for 16 years. I was professional for like the last 4 because I started when I was really young dancing and I just never stopped. And dance is an amazing sport. I love it. It is unfortunately one of the highest risk injury sports for your children and yourselves. And so I injured out by the time I was 18. And my whole life kind of hit the floor. Because it's all I knew, it's all I did, it's everything I loved, and I defined myself by what I did, which we'll talk about a little bit later, I think. But I defined all of who I was by what the actions that I took as a dancer. And so when the floor bottomed out from underneath me and I chose not to dance because quite frankly, it would have taken, those little bottle of Advils that are like 25 pills a bottle. I was living on one of those a week and I was like 16 years old.
Oh.
So, yeah, I was like, I'm either going to rip out my gut here and burn a hole in it, or I have to find a better way to do this. So I went into a lot of physical therapy. I had physical therapy for 4 years for all the different injuries I had from dance. And I always had to be exercising in order to rehab from that. So I started working in gyms. And I was behind the front desk at a gym and someone had a question and I was like, oh, I can answer that. And they went, are you a trainer? And I was like, no. I'm like, you should be. And I was like, you're right. So I became a trainer in college because I couldn't hold the usual kind of jobs that everybody has in college where you're on your feet because of all my injuries. So training, after about 10 years of doing personal training and working in the retail fitness industry, I shifted to coaching because I just noticed this crazy difference between how people show up, like the New Year's resolution vibe, and they're all excited and they want to go, and they're like, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And then about 2 months in, they're like a bright light and the bulb is starting to fade. And then like 2 months after that, you're like, wait, your dimmer switch is on low now. How do we get that back up? And I didn't have the tools, the mental, emotional tools to really like get people to kick themselves back up a notch. So I added the coaching component. That was 11 years ago. Went to the Coach Training Institute and went through their pretty intensive program. It takes about 18 months to go through their entire coaching certification, and was accredited through that. And then did a blend. That's where the corporate wellness piece comes in, because I took the training background and the health education background and the coaching background. I put them together in corporate wellness because a lot of corporations will hire coaches as part of their wellness programs. So my original foray into coaching was health coaching. And I did that for 5 years, working inside about 10 of the properties in Las Vegas. So from property to property, coaching everyone from the, the ESL employee who lovingly takes out the garbage every day for all the people in Vegas. You don't even know how hard these people work, all the way up to the CFO of MGM. So it was a really broad range of experience there for coaching. And I always get to this 10-year point where I'm like, I feel like I want some more. And that's when I added the transpersonal psychology piece. In 2016, I finished my master's degree in transpersonal psychology, which is, like you said, that study of human potential and where we can really take ourselves.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, I love it.
You're freaking fantastic. Wow.
I had no idea that you could even measure human potential.
Well, what it is it's looking at psychology has evolved over the course of its time. Psychology was originally structured as a science, like all the other sciences, a subject-object relationship. And that's why, theories like Freudian theories of psychoanalysis go, well, if you're this, then here's the cause and here's the fix. And so we look at this subject-object relationship and we know ourselves by looking over there. And then psychology evolved to include behaviorism, where you're looking at more like social emotional behaviors, and okay, let's correct the behaviors. And then from there, it transitioned to what you might have heard of as humanistic psychology, where they went, well, wait, we're not just a brain and this thing, this subject object, and we're not just a bunch of behaviors, we're actually a whole being over here. So maybe we should look at the whole person. So that was the birth of humanistic psychology. And from there, it shifted to what's very popular, has been popular for the last decade, is positive psychology, right? The will and spirit of a human to create a positive experience for themselves. And transpersonal psychology evolved from there. So it kind of goes on this scale of evolution through the science of psychology. And I like to tell a little bit of that story so people can see the utility of all those different types of psychological disciplines. And transpersonal psychology says, okay, you have a body. Yep, you're a whole human. And you also have something that animates you, right? Like, what's that thing that makes you you? What's that piece that brings you alive, that makes you not just a bunch of physical cells sitting on the couch? And because of that spirit, that vibe, whatever you want to call it, inside of you, that really is the thing that animates you, that can't be measured.
Yeah.
Right? That can't be measured.
Yeah.
Its capacity for creation is limitless. And
That's
so
very interesting. Okay.
So it pulls that sense of spirituality into psychology in a completely non-secular way. It's not related to any particular religion, and it can be used in any discipline, whether it's professional or faith-based or educational or medical. Transpersonal psychology can blend in all those spaces.
It's interesting because I know that they have developed a way to measure the energy that our heart generates. Mm-hmm. So it makes a lot of sense to me. I'm a logical person. And to me, it's like, if you can measure the energy of my heartbeat or activity or the energy that's in my body, and you can measure it out however many waves it's coming out in any direction, mm-hmm. I feel like that you can, like, we're on the brink of being able to measure the impact or what creates that and what affects it. I think it's cool.
Absolutely. I think you can, it's a little existential, but I think you can grab that and compare it to, the way that they're proving theories of relativity now with like discoveries of black holes and all this different science that's come up, right? And this concept that what you're pointing to is that everything is energy. I'll tell people, E actually does, E equals MC squared. It really is just everything is made out of energy. And you can come at that from a faith perspective, and that energy can be divine. And you can come at that from a science perspective and straight up prove it with the distance of a black hole. You can see in that theory of relativity. So I love the blending of like quantum science is another place where transpersonal psychology and regular science start to blend. But just this idea that this is the point of integration, and this is how I came around to working on performance. It's this point of integration between the physical body we live in, right? The metaphysical experience that we have around us, and that thing that animates us. And if you can integrate that power and that energy and that force that animates you to really coordinate on a very high level with the physical body that you have, like crazy things start to happen.
Yeah, mind blown.
Yeah,
so
I'm like, okay, let me just drop my mic, no questions.
She did that earlier. I think it's interesting. Like I read an article where it talked about how a lot of our body is made of carbon, which is like the same thing that that stardust is made out of. And I was just like, that's fascinating. And there was like another element of the energy that's created from that, and how they have these satellites that are measuring and looking at the interconnectivity of the stars to each other, and then to the planet, and then to us. And it's really fascinating, the things that they're starting to look at and change their vantage point. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Transpersonal psychology. It's
so interesting because we truthfully all are interconnected, right? So if you ever think about, before someone walks into a room, you can actually, if you're paying attention, feel the energy shift depending upon whether they're in a good mood or a bad mood. Yeah. Before someone even walks through the door, their energy is already starting to flow in that direction of their intention. And so, yeah. And, it's one of those things, I think it was Marianne Williamson who talked about, if you walk up to a conversation or walk up to a group of people and you're like, hey, how's it going? Like, I can feel they were probably just talking about me. Like, I have no indication. Everyone's smiling, everything's fine, but like, I know some shit just went down here. What is happening? Like, you just feel it. And so it's interesting what you're talking about, like how empathetic we all truly are if we just pay attention. Like, you know so much more in your mind's eye than we even can possibly, give ourselves credit for. So it's so beautiful, the work that you're doing, and how you described that was so eloquent and connected so many dots for me. So
right?
That is amazing.
Well, and that's the goal of the work, is that when you were talking, I kind of get this sense of like a two-way street. Like, so you've got information from the physical body, and you've got this beautiful nervous system, this internal navigation system, and those nerve ends go out to everywhere, from your gut to your toes to the tip of every strand of hair, right? And they're always informing you from the inside. And then you have, what you were pointing to me, Jen, was this concept of duality versus non-duality. The more information you get to choose what perspective you want to take. Are you living in a state of duality, where there's a subject object, things are separate, and it's really easier for you to understand things when you look at them over there? Or is it best for you personally to come from a place of did I say that backwards? No, yeah, duality, separate. Non-duality, where everything truly is connected. There is no separation. And so you've got the internal communication from your body, and honing your ability to really have that internal conversation with less emotional triggering and response. That's super key. And then being able to receive the information from the outside. And if you can get those two things to come together, that it's like, you just lock in to your ability to really be integrated and be using that information, kind of from all directions, to not only your benefit, but the benefit of everything around you.
I have a question, Lisa. Is that kind of like the woo that you talk about, how we're woo, like we can pick up on stuff? Like, what book was that you said?
So Coach Jen, what we're talking about is, there's a leadership assessment called Strengths Finders with 14 different characteristics of leadership. And one of them is woo, which, I forgive my statistics, but I think only like 11% of the population has that as their first strength, which is really, it's social intuition. Where you can just walk up to someone and you instantly know where to meet them. Whether you can be like, hey girl, hey, or if you need to be like, hello, how are you?
Yeah.
It's not about changing who we are, but it's about meeting people where they are from that aspect of our genuineness. I don't know if I said that as eloquently, but right. So my question with that, Jen, and it's so funny, we're like wooing out together, girl, because I was going to ask about that. Coach Jen, I wanted to ask you, what is psychology's view on intuition from a science standpoint? What is that, right? Because we finally have a leadership assessment that acknowledges intuition is a legitimate skill in how we lead, how we connect, which is amazing. So where does that overlap or interact with psychology?
So many things come up. I think that once psychology started to really engage with the whole human, right, in the beginning of that humanistic psychology movement, I really feel like there's an element there. All those theorists, if you kind of read back through the theories of, and actually if you go even way back to the beginning, like Freud just didn't finish his work. Freud acknowledged that there is an element of human experience that he hadn't studied yet. And it was an immeasurable, intangible, untouchable thing that was like the next, I feel like Star Trek, the next generation of his, exploration. And so I think psychology has always acknowledged that there's an element of human experience that couldn't be measured originally by that traditional scientific structure, where you have a subject and object, and one thing is helping you define one compared to the other. But increasingly, there's more and more room for the concept that that the spirit in you that animates you, and the aliveness, the energy that makes you really alive in this world, is fundamental to who you are as a person. It's not just something. So it's grown over time in its acceptance of the concept of the intangible parts of human experience being fundamentally important to how we grow and develop.
That is so cool.
Does that answer your question?
It is. It makes sense. It's fascinating. Now, my next question is, when you started this business of helping people with this, how do you find people that either A, need it, are aware of it, want it? Like, how do you talk to me about lead generation for you, Jen, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. I think for me, one of the biggest things I had to do for me personally for my business was niche it down. I had to niche it down to an audience and say, these are my people, this is my tribe. And I've coached, like I said, I did the health coaching thing. I've done corporate coaching. I've done coaching with executives and directors. So I've done coaching like all across the board with different populations. And it's not like I don't have those clients anymore. I still do coach those individuals. But the niche of what I do now is focused really from the life experiences that I've had. And I think that happens with a lot of people's work, right? Like we swing around to wanting to work in the places we've come from to maybe ease the journey or flatten the slope so it's not such a steep climb for the people that come after us. As an athlete, I know that the truth that no one talks about in sport is that you will stop playing. And it's a hard truth, and people always go, I don't want to hear that. But the reality is every athlete stops playing, and they use it as an excuse to not develop personally. They use that their fear stops them because they get attached to a role. And Lisa, we were talking about, I said something about loving people and identity crisis, and so I'm going to play with that for a minute.
Yeah.
In the sense of athletes lose that state of action that helps them know who they're being, and they have to ask the question. It's required to ask the question, now what, and where am I going to go from here? And the unfortunate thing I see over and over, you've seen it in Michael Phelps' story, and you've seen it in a lot of other athletes' story, is all of this amazing developmental work they did, they drop it like it was nothing. And like the sport is what made it happen. And then they walk away and try to start from scratch. And I'm like, no, wait a second, hold on. The sport doesn't make you. You make the sport. The sport is nothing without you. Right. So it's instilling in the athlete the value and the inherent characteristics that sport turned on in them. It's just a light switch. So part of the lead generation is really getting the message out there to athletes that you are more than your sport, that this one experience, I don't care if it's 2 decades, 5 years, 40 decades of your life, right? That's why Kobe Bryant's come out with the Mamba mentality, and he won the Academy Award for the cartoonist work that he did, because he took his life journey and said, I won't stop being an athlete. This is who I am. Yeah. So part of it is being willing to take the gifts of the role that you're in with you. And that's what I learned to do in my journey as an athlete. So I go out and I speak to schools and student groups and parent groups about the fact that you are so much more than your role defines you as. And so on the parenting front, my personal experience with being a parent was just brutal. Short, blunt version is that 7.5 months pregnant, I found out my marriage was ending. A month later, my husband left, and I was alone, and he needed to. It's all good. Like, separation happens for a reason. And we co-parent as best we can now, but I was alone with the baby, my first baby, in a big house. And then the day I went back to work, I lost my job. I mean, so I had another one of those, like the fall, I was let go of.
Happens more than you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like the floor fell out, and so I was like, oh my God, I'm here again. I'm on the floor again. And I was like, I'm not starting over this time. I have way too much good stuff. I'm not starting from scratch. So my lead generation comes from really helping people see that the experiences that they've had have just been the switch that turns on what they need to move forward. Yeah. And I work with parents because they get stuck in the tunnel of being a parent, either forget or lament who they wanted to be before those kids came and feel like they're never going to reach it. And I'm like,
Identity crisis.
Exactly, identity crisis.
Girl, we have a collaboration we need to do. So there's
Okay.
something baked into that, because we'll totally talk more, because yes, there are so many parents who, you know, and you and I have both been there, where we're like, who the hell am I now?
Yes.
What the hell? Who am I? I've got puke on me. I haven't showered in 3 days. I've, you know, have had the same sheets on my bed for a month. What the actual F is happening? So yeah. Okay, more to come. We'll go back to the subject.
And that vibe happens over and over again, right? Like your kids hit the end of preschool and you're like, oh my God, they're going to kindergarten. They don't see as much. Now what am I going to do? Correct. They hit high school. Again. Yep. They hit college. You do it again. Gosh. You're constantly going through the identity crisis of who are they? Who am I?
You're literally narrating my book right now. Like, this is amazing. Yes.
Sure. Okay. I'll help you with it. Right? So they're constantly going through that crisis. So that's why I love and work with parents, because my experience as a parent said, I mean, I had a corporate gig. I made plenty of money. I worked almost full time. I got my master's degree. I was alone with my baby. And you know what happened? I got sick. I was so sick from the exhaustion of my life that I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I want to be the drop-off pickup parent. I want to take my lunch and go to the teddy bear picnic in the middle of the day. Whatever it is that's happening with my kid, I want to be there and I want to do my work. And that's why I say mompreneur. I go by Coach Jen, because what I do, it used to be everything that I am, what I do, right? And now it just infuses my life and there's no separation. So lead generation comes from the public service announcement of you are more than what you do. You are more than your role assigns you. And let's get in there and figure out what you've already learned and how you're going to use it for the next. And that's where that performance aspect comes in, because it's about creating the experiences and the outcomes that you want in every area of your life.
And how awesome that you modeled it.
Doing my best.
Badass mama. Hey, I have to just call out too, when we talk about this concept of roles and titles. So, you know, when you talk about identity crisis, I even think of, you know, the clients that have left corporate and are doing their own thing, and they have been tied to a corporate title and a corporate identity for decades. So, I mean, this can happen in general. You know, you talked about athletes, you talked about, like, you know, single non-parent title and sort of like mentally what that means to you, and you know, now this parent role and what that means, and your identity is baked into that. And then, you know, these corporate titles, there's so many different boxes. Like, we need to stop putting ourselves in boxes. You know, Jen and I were talking about this as far as it goes with gender. Like, why does it have to be like girl power? Because if anybody were to say like bro power or male power, it would be like an uprising. But guess what? Men deserve love as well. And actually they're kind of the group that's missing it right now, because they're not as collaborative as women. You know, Jen always talks about you power. And that's what this conversation brings me back to. It's about you as an individual and connecting back to who you are. That's your freaking identity. It's not a title or a role or a name or a box or a gender. It's your soul.
Yeah, and I love the fact that, Jen, you recognize that life is cyclical and we're going to go through phases of life. And it like, as soon as we're aware of that, we can be, you know, cognizant of what it's going to do to us, how it's going to impact us, and if we need help or support, to reach out to that. Because I absolutely suffered from that in 2015. I talk about having titles and upward progression in a career and being a superstar for over 2 decades. Like, I was the picture of corporate America, like, yay, you know, and then all the accolades that you get from your parents who are like, I'm so proud of you. You keep doing all these great things. And then I'm like done, because I'm only seeing my kids for an hour and a half a day. And I resign and decide to go and be an entrepreneur, which I don't know how to do. Like, I did not know how to do that. Thank God for Stacy, right? But I had to struggle through that because I had been the subject matter expert and climbing that ladder and personal growth and all of these things. And now all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have somebody that can make that deck for me. I don't have someone who can fix my printer.
It's all you.
I'm gonna fix the copy machine. Like, I need help, you know? And it's like those moments where you realize, oh shit, I gotta get it together. But had I not had somebody like Stacy who was like, hold on a second, this does not define you. This is who you are, and just bringing it back. So now I feel like I'm better prepared for the next phase of life, which is going to be kids going to middle school or high school. And it's so real, Jen. What you're saying is so real. And people, you might not realize it as you're going through it. And then you're looking back going, oh crap, I have an empty house. And I was a mother of all these kids that now they're gone. What the hell now? It's right. It's the what next factor.
Yeah, and it's what's now, so that you can plan for what's next, right? It is the what's next factor, because like we are so trained to go ahead that we don't always pay attention to. Like I said, you got so many sources. You got this body informing you all the time. You got this divine sense informing you all the time, and it can be a logical, scientific based one. It can be a woo-woo divinity one. I don't care. There is a source of information outside of you that comes in.
Agreed.
Then get off the podcast.
Agreed.
Right? Like, so you got it coming up, you got it coming down. What's happening now? Find out where they're meeting. What are the skills you have from these other experiences? And you bring it all together so that when you know what's happening now, and this is what's next, you don't even have to think about it. It actually lines up for you.
Yeah. Because you manifest it. You get your energy aligned and the universe conspires to.
Exactly. And that's why I love working with people in this state of kind of like identity crisis or transition or challenge of who am I? Where's this going? How am I supposed to do this? Now, what do I do? Right. So I love the athletes because they're so lost. They've been spoon fed exactly what they're supposed to do from day one to day a million and whatever. Here's how I train. Here's who I breathe. Here's who I hang out with. Here's who I listen to. I mean, it's so programming as an athlete. And the amazing thing about working with anybody who needs to do that shift is that they are on the verge of discovering that their actual potential is exponentially bigger than they've always defined it in that role.
Yeah.
So Coach Jen, I have to ask, when we, initially connected, you said that there is one specific thing that is holding people back. And I told you, don't tell me, because I want you to save this for the podcast. You said there's the number one thing that is holding people back, from reaching this highest level of potential or realizing this highest level of potential. What comes to mind for that now? Like what can you share that we can sort of start to be on alert for journey?
Mm-hmm. So there's three things that came up. The first one is fear.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is perspectives. Mary Poppins, it's all in how you look at it. And the third one is self-love. The fear will tell you there's only one way. And it's a very seductive story, because depending on what your circumstances are, when fear says this is the only way it's going to go, and you're already in a state of scarcity or I'm not sure or doubt is on, or right, just you're not necessarily in a very clear place. When fear says this is the only way it's going to work, you'll believe it. It's the same reason people follow dictators. They go, this is how it's going to work, and you do what I tell you to, and you make it simple and easy. Your fear makes it simple and easy, straight like dictators. So you lose your sense of self when you can't separate your fear from what do I think. And there's a super simple coaching practice that is a little bit silly, and it's the reason it works. If you're a Harry Potter fan, it's like turning the bug art into the funny thing to make you laugh. And then all of a sudden the bug art that came out of the box that became your scariest thing isn't so scary anymore because you turned it into a spider or put it in grandma's clothing. It's one to acknowledge that, you know what I mean? Like if you've seen that Harry Potter, you know what I'm talking about. So I have little children who watch Harry Potter all the time. But what I'm talking about is the ability to acknowledge your fear separate from you. And that takes perspective. That takes the ability to watch your fear like it's a movie on a screen, animate it in your mind. You can write it down. You can draw it. You can pick any creative medium. But you want to say, what is the story of my fear? And go ahead and get that story out so you can see it. Because once it's over here and you're back here watching it, you'll begin to feel yourself. And you'll begin to know, am I afraid or is it just my fear?
Hey, Jen, in this illustration, are we associated or dissociated? Like, do we see, is it GoPro we can see out of our own eyes, or are we seeing ourselves within the story of fear? I'm just trying to.
No, that's a great question. It's going to show up differently for different people. A lot of times, most coaching will disassociate it, which means that they'll make it a character, a place, or a thing, right? And so you just make your fear a noun. Like one of my favorite fears ever was the Tasmanian devil. I said, what does it look like? What's the story? My client said, well, it's making me rush. It's pushing me. It's telling me I don't have time. It's telling me I don't have enough. And I'm like, cool. What does that feel like? It feels tight. It feels fast. It feels spun. And I'm like, what character is tight, fast, and spun? And they're like, Tasmanian devil. And I'm like, great. So now I need you to let the devil spin and just listen to what it's saying and take a step back and watch. And when you have that practice of, right, can you feel it? You actually get to separate from the story that's happening in your body with this visual, physical reference. You've now given it something concrete like Tasmanian devil. And when it comes up, you'd be like, oh, there's my devil. And you
I just had a few choice words for that little devil.
Do you have one that says, I have no time?
No, I don't know. I was envisioning what you're saying and how you literally can now step back and look at your fear and say, hey, listen, a-hole, crap. I'm done. I'm done having you inform my thoughts. Like, back away. It allows you to give it like this energy of disconnection. I love it. I think it's great. I can completely visualize what you're saying.
And that allows you to have perspective to see. And sometimes in coaching, it's often called a gremlin or a saboteur. Like sometimes you need to create separation from that. But I find more often than not, what's the third piece was self-love. I find more often than not that in the long run, there's two things you're going to do. Three things. First, you're going to play that game where you separate. And you get a sense of what is this thing? What am I dealing with? What's its story? Write down the story, make it a color, write down how it feels, like really know the experience of what that thing is doing to you.
Yeah, like hit every modality, right?
Totally. If you're a visual person, draw it. If you're an auditory person, listen to it, right? If you're a kinesthetic person, get up and spin around like the devil and then stop and see how you feel. I know it sounds crazy.
No, but it's true.
So
this is what Jen talks about in her 7 steps to influence. That's a big part of that. So
it's awesome. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah. So once you do that separation, then it's time to talk to you. Then it's time to talk to you and go, okay, what do I think? What do I think about, let's say it was deadlines, just random, deadlines. And someone who can't ever meet a deadline, they have a fear about a deadline, they always get freaked out when there's a deadline, then they don't get anything done, and they skip past it and deny all these major accomplishments they would have had because they can't meet a deadline. But the fear has a story about the deadline. They go, okay, well, what do I think about a deadline? And now you can build your own story. You can creatively, literally build your own story separate from the Tasmanian devil. And then the third piece of integration from that takes some time is learning to love both. Because rejecting that fear and rejecting that Tasmanian, you can do boundaries, be like, back off. But rejecting it entirely and saying, get out of my life, is you saying that to a piece of you.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't ever get rid of it, but just in the way that you can learn to collaborate, work, and even use it as a friend. I mean, my fear is my friend now. I'm like, what's up? I feel the spidey senses, the hair standing up. What do you want me to pay attention to And I work.
You learn from it.
So true. Fear serves its place. Fear is aiming to protect us. I don't know. You have the psychology degree, but I don't think our fear is like, hey, how can I screw them today? How can I screw them today? It's not about that. It's about alerting you to something. And it's interesting because I heard once, and I don't remember, sorry, I usually try to give credit to all my sources, but I heard that if you don't fully know all the answers to a story, your brain naturally starts to fill in the holes in the information, and that's where assumptions are born from. And usually those assumptions are not correct. And so I think that's really where your fear is, right? It starts kind of trying to fill in those holes of the situation. And when you can pause and separate from that and say, wait, what is this fear trying to tell me? What is the message? Why am I being stopped in my tracks? Why am I being redirected right now? And you can tune into that, then you can respond versus react to that fear.
Boom. That's right.
Boom.
Boom. That's right. That's right. Drop that mic, Chica. Drop it. You hit the nail on the head so fabulously. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Yes.
We're gonna have so many good clips from this. I think this is so helpful. I think this literally could be life-changing for so many people. So
it really can.
And sometimes it's fear, and sometimes it's doubt, and sometimes it's right. So like the Move Strong method has a model, and that's one of the ways that you're able to do this process over and over.
What is that?
You said Move Strong has a model on how to get.
Oh, okay.
Walk us through that one more time. Say that again, Jen.
Absolutely. So you hit the nail on the head with what you were saying in terms of your ability to collaborate and become friends with the emotional experiences that you have previously tried to avoid, cut out, murder, push down, suppress. What happens when you keep a child quiet?
Well, but it breaks my heart that you just said that because it's so unnatural.
Yeah.
Exactly. That voice, all those emotions need you to listen. They want you to listen. They're part of who you are. And it can be overwhelming if they're all coming at once, which is why you learn one at a time to separate them out, have a relationship, learn to respond as opposed to react, right? And really get a beautiful integrative process with that information from the inside, that information from the outside, so it becomes useful to you. And you just did a beautiful job, Lisa, of describing exactly the utility of that as an exercise, right? That's why we did the boom and the mic and all the deservingness. And what I did is in the coaching process after so many years is I created a super basic model. It has 2 beginning steps and then a 3-part repeat. And it's the ABCs: awareness, being, and choice. So we just did an awareness exercise when we stepped apart and we saw that piece and we asked ourselves, what do I think compared to my fear? That's an awareness exercise. The being exercise is what you naturally stepped right into, Lisa, where you said, I can be this in relation to that, and I can choose that so that I can respond. And the choice at that point, do we even have to think about it? Are you going to reject your fear and cut it out? Or based on what you just experienced, are you going to work with it and maybe even be grateful for it and move forward with the wisdom it just gave you?
I like that you said be grateful for it, because at one point, most likely that fear served you. Right?
Yes.
So it just no longer serves you right now.
Yes.
It probably protected you from something at some point. It just doesn't serve you in this situation.
Exactly. Not the right tool for the job. I love the metaphor I use all the time with that. My clients go, I'm like, okay, you're hanging a picture in your house and you got the nails and you got the picture. What tool do you need?
Yeah.
A hammer.
Yeah, I know. Thank you for answering my totally ridiculous, obvious answer question. You need a hammer. Okay, so you hang the pictures, you get that piece done, and then you have a sink full of dishes. That's next. Now you go to the sink, but you don't drop the hammer. What happens to your dishes?
Yeah, well, I'm going to be washing them with a hammer.
You're going to crush them. You're going to explode. You're going to break them. They're going to explode. And so what happens to you when an emotional tool that has served you in the past comes to you in the present? Does it feel like it might make you pop or lose your you know what?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Same thing. You're just, the wrong tool is there in the present because it autopilots in. And so as we become aware of it, we can choose how we want to be with it. Like we can establish who we're being with it. And then our choice to respond comes naturally.
And that's the beauty of coaching, is that, you know, you help give people all these variety of tools. So depending on the situation, they can say, I need the hammer, I need the dish cloth, I need what have you. So
I might even need my Tasmanian devil. Get in here and back me up, make me fierce, because I need my fear right now so that I have that vibing energy to be fierce. Who knows? Maybe you can use it to help you.
Yeah. So Jen, if somebody from our audience wanted to reach out to you and get help with this, how do they contact you? What's it look like to get a hold of you?
You know, email or text is totally fine. I think it's just the easiest way to do it. Some people will connect on social media, which is fine too. So email is jen@movestrongmethod.com, just like they said, MOVE strongmethod.com, jen@movestrongmethod.com. The phone number to text is 805-244-6878. And on social media,
you on Instagram.
Yeah, thank you, sweetheart. So Move Strong Method is on Instagram. And then the Facebook page is Coaching with Jen Matthews. Okay. There's a little bit of a 2 brands in one. There's Coach Jen, and then there's the brand of Move Strong Method. So Instagram is Move Strong Method, and Facebook, what happens is most of the athletes that I work with are on Instagram, and most of the parents that I work with are on Facebook.
So right. That makes sense, because they have 2 different users.
Well, Jen, this has been an absolute lesson in life. And, you know, I feel pretty confident this message is going to teach someone, influence someone, multiple people actually, and help them to have more perspective on sort of what they're navigating through. And Oh my gosh. Jen and I, just like our pre-screen, I think Jen and I feel like we could talk to you for another 2 hours. So
Yeah.
on behalf of our listeners,
we'll do it again.
yeah, no, for sure. And I'm going to reach out to you for a collaboration. I think this piece around self-love, like there's so much to be taught there, so that we can begin to heal ourselves and blossom. So this has been wonderful, amazing. Thank you everyone for joining us. And yeah, look forward to sharing this with our listeners.
You are so welcome. Can I throw one more freebie out there for them?
Go for
Please
it.
do.
In honor of that self-love piece, one of the fundamental tenets of the Move Strong method is called self-service first. And it's the theory that when you do at least one thing, it doesn't matter how big or small, it literally doesn't matter how small. When you do one thing for yourself first, that's the way that the cup fills so that the overflow can touch the rest of the world and have the impact that you want to have. So on the website, movestrongmethod.com is a freebie that's about building your base. It's about building the base of strength that you need to move forward. And so you can scroll down and there's just a little sign up there. You just give your email and then you get a full, it's just the basic of building your base for cultivating that self-love and taking care of yourself first.
Cool.
Everyone, please go download that. Everyone could use a dose of self-love. So Coach Jen, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. It's so much fun to play with you.
Thanks,
All right, everybody.
Have a good one.